Hello, Internet. My name is Sir Lord, and today we're gonna talk about death. So, what do I mean by this? I kind of want to talk about it in a broad sense as like a cycle, right? And I mean like actual death. Now, I will be using mediums like movies and whatnot to help explain the idea or how I view death, because it's like kind of a very touchy subject for some people. And I totally get it. It's the fear of the great unknown. Who knows what goes on beyond our mortal coil? Like, you can't. You really just can't. So there's all sorts of different ways and interpretations and religions and views on like what happens afterwards. And I'm not gonna get too deep into that, but I want to talk about it in terms of the physical realm. So, if we have immortality, for instance, let's just go on a hypothetical, right? So, if you are an immortal being, right? If you become immortal, you can no longer die. So, if you can no longer die, then you are removing like the essence of the universe from itself. It is contained in you, and you can't really give it back, if that makes sense, because you will always exist. So, if everyone was immortal, then eventually there would be no more universe left to give. Now, that's very broad, and most people are probably like, well, actually, it's kind of a complicated topic. But life is a cycle, right? You have the beginning of life when you're a child, or when you're a plant, like small base plant, or whatever. Like, you have the beginning of life when you're a single cell, and you go on and on and on throughout life. You live, you breathe, you do all that stuff. And then you die. And then when you die, you return to the earth, the wind, the soil, like whatever it is. Like, your body decomposes, etc. You get cremated, turned into ash, and whatever it is. And it constantly fuels itself. What you take, you give back eventually. At all points, or at some point, you will give it back. Wealth, you won't always get to keep it. It will be passed down, aka you're giving it away upon death. It is the final gift you give the world, is death. Which I know sounds very morbid, but it's kind of how it works, right? Like, when you die, you can't take anymore, so you give everything away. It might not be to the right places, and some people might impose whatever your will is to kind of make it so you can still take, but it's not you, it is your successor who will start to take, which is an interesting like concept. So in One Piece, you have the idea of inherited will. You inherit the will of the people behind, like, who gave you the idea, or it doesn't even have to be directly them. You might just carry their will or their spirit based on all sorts of different factors, which is kind of crazy to think about. But then you also have Star Wars interpretation, right? So Star Wars also views death in a very, very similar way. So I know everyone's like space wizards and whatnot, but take a minute to think about the Force for a little bit. I know some people really don't like thinking about the Force, aka the midichlorian and whatnot, but it's fine. Like, of course, people would try to like quantify this quote unquote space magic. It's space magic in the second half because that's what it's like. Space magic is what it's called in the original trilogy, because all existence, the hierarchy, the order, the Jedi, the Sith are pretty much extinct. There's only two. And it's considered like a weird religion at that point because it's been so desensitized. Or not desensitized, but like the information is just not there. Like, you don't see Jedi constantly. The Force isn't something that's easy to grasp or that everything can feel. And even if you can feel it, you don't quite understand that it is the Force. The religion of the Jedi is gone. That is why Revenge of the Sith is the way it is. That's why it's space magic. But when they were at the height of their power, of course people would try to figure out what it is, quantify it, understand the Force. But the reason I bring Star Wars up is because of the idea of the Force. So, a lot of people, especially with the newer trilogy, and the newer trilogy kind of changes it to an extent, think that the Force being balanced is equal parts good, equal parts evil. But that is not what balance is in Star Wars, in my interpretation, and I'm pretty sure it's how it is, because how could you bring balance in that sense if you get rid of all the Sith? It doesn't bring balance at all. Like, it just makes no sense if you view it through that lens. But there's multiple kinds of balance, okay? Everything being equal is not always balance. Sometimes you have to have things in harmony. You have to have a system, a cycle. Everything goes through its different like ebbs and flows. It's more of an Eastern type of balance, which Star Wars and the Force and the Jedi are based off of, are loosely based off of. But that is the idea of balance, is that if you have a flowing creek, right? Balance is it always flowing. It is constantly going. It is not being obscured or blocked. But when you are blocked, it causes a lack of resources or an imbalance. Pools start to go away. The one, wherever it's blocked, it keeps all the resources for itself, starving the rest of the ecosystem of its balance, of its resources. And that is what I believe Star Wars balance is supposed to be. The Sith take. That is why they are considered evil, is because they are filled with emotions. They are trying to further their selfish, ambitious rule. They are trying to constantly grow and grow in power. That is why the idea of immortality is so important to them. They want the power to stop death itself, because if they can stop death, then they will have infinite power. But it is a selfish goal, right? You're just constantly taking from others. You're taking from the Force itself. You're taking from the people around you. You are constantly changing what is being what you are using for your own life force. That is why it is an imbalance. They are forcibly removing the cycle of life by prolonging their own life. That is why balance must be restored, is because they are actively ruining the balance of the world, the balance of the life cycle, which is constantly what the Force is described of. It is the life that you feel in everything. It is the trees, it is any form of, it's a life force. And if you're constantly taking from the life force and not giving it, not returning to it, then you are not balanced. The world, the Force, is not balanced. And that's kind of how death is in the real world. Everyone's like, well, we should constantly try to strive for immortality. But if there is no death, eventually there will be no need for life. You won't need to have children, because the propagation of human society is no longer necessary. Now, will it probably still happen? For sure, until you get to the point where no death means nothing new can happen without going to another world. Colonization of a different planet so you can take the resources of that planet. Now, on an individual scale, it probably doesn't affect us all that much. But if everyone becomes immortal, what's stopping everyone from taking and taking and taking? It is a very selfish goal, Hence why I think it's constantly portrayed as like a bad thing in art and media and fiction, because it is the ultimate selfishness, and why giving it to someone else is seen as the active active selflessness is strange to me, at least, because you're forcing someone else to constantly be taking for the rest of their life. They are holding on to everything, and I think that's eventually why they start to want to die, or at least in media. Now, not everyone's going to have this interpretation. Some people are probably going to be like, oh, sweet, I'm immortal, I can do whatever the heck I want. There's no repercussions for pretty much anything because death is not an issue. The greatest punishment that I could receive does not affect me. Now, you could be like, well, there's torture. You could be tortured for the rest of your life. You could probably still be mutilated. You're probably not also forever young. There's a lot of semantics that can go with that. So we're not going to deal with that. But that's kind of what I wanted to talk about. Um, just loose conversation on death, just sharing my viewpoints. If you guys have different opinions of how you see it, or have any other ideas about the Force, inherited will. I know we didn't talk too much about that, but any of these things. I know yesterday's video was a long one, so I'm gonna keep this one kind of shorter. Yeah, just let me know in the comments below, and let's talk about it. Peace.